Okay, so that was a very precise outlook. Thank you so much to the Oficina de Eventos for that perfect timing, actually. So yeah, I'm going to now start the second Glocal, the Glocal talks, design and well-being. Like I said in the previous, during the inter time, it's not just about saying well-being to being healthy in terms of a physical plane, but how different places of human development and well-being are now involved into this idea of being healthy. How does it mean in terms of psychological, social, communal well-being? What does it mean? So in that sense, design and its different ramifications can become, or actually are, a useful and necessary tools to identify and conceptualize ideas to create better ways of understanding and solving old and new health problems in these fields. In this talk, we are going to reflect upon the role of design and how it serves to improve different aspects of health around the world. To this talk, we invoke two great panelists to help us to try to understand this idea. The first one is Petra Salari. She's a great person, a great friend of mine, and a very interesting PhD candidate from Loughborough University in the UK. She is a designer and researcher working in the area of design for well-being. She focuses on behavior change and emotion and specializes in the area of design for taboo topics. Currently, Petra is undertaking her PhD on the topic of the impact of online communication on the intimacy building in the early stage of romantic relationships. Prior to coming to Loughborough, she finished her master's degree at the Delft University of Technology with a distinction. In her master thesis, Petra has developed a game that to be played in family homes in India to battle the taboo of menstruation and enhance the well-being of premenstrual girls. Petra continues to work on taboo topics, both in academia and in the industry. Thank you, Petra. And our other panelist is Emmanuel Chicleves. I hope to say that I'm saying your last name well. Great. He's a co-director of the Future Cities Research Institute at Lancaster University, a convener of the Global Health SIG of the Design Research Society, or a special interest group. Dr. Emmanuel Chicleves is a senior lecturer in Design for Health and the co-director of the Future Cities Research Institute at Lancaster University, and the convener for the Design Research Society of a special interest group on global health. His research addresses the UN Sustainable Development Goals in health and well-being, championing a blue zone lifestyle, people living healthy into old age, involving stakeholders and communities so that we and the planet can stay healthy. Currently, he works with communities in the UK to discover how community support can help to reduce hospital visits. In Ghana, to co-create cleaning interventions to prevent infections at home. In Europe, to develop ready-to-eat seafood products with digital labels, making healthy food safer and accessible. His research is published in over 90 international research articles and has been featured by national and international prints and over 55 online media outlets, reaching over 15 million readers. That's amazing. I have to say it. Well, of course, following the previous Glocal, we send our panelists to questions to reflect, or a couple of questions to reflect about this idea of Glocal and well-being. This is gonna be like an informal, formal conversation about the topic in which we can intervene. You guys on chat can answer. You can make your questions as well or opinions, and we're going to reflect based on that. I'm going to start by introducing the first question. What does it mean to be a designer who focuses on an aspect of the idea of health, of well-being? Which challenges, opportunities, and obstacles have you identified based on your experience? And I think this is going to be a very interesting idea, considering that both of you have this type of global approach, not only in terms of a specific region, but on a worldwide level. So I want to start with Petra. Now she already unmuted herself. So yeah.
I'm prepared. Thank you so much, Cesar, and thank you for everyone for organizing this. I'm really excited to be here. Well, one thing I think is, for me personally, it's so gratifying to be working on health and well-being, because I don't think there's a better imprint and impact that you can have on the on people. When it comes to the obstacles and challenges, I think, at least for me, what was one of the biggest ones was definitely understanding the behavior and how people would react when you speak about health and well-being. And also, I think, unraveling the different aspects of culture. So I remember, like, when I was working in India, how much I needed to understand different aspects of culture, such as, who am I talking to? Who is this person in the society? Am I talking to a father? Am I talking to a grandfather? Am I talking to a daughter in the family? The conversation is totally different. And often also how you create the connection with the people. So I think one definitely aspect which came, let's say, as a solution in this way, I think, was how you connect with your focus group. And I think for me, it was that I tried to make, I think subconsciously, but I tried to make everyone my friends. And the minute that you just get this personal connection with people, you just get to understand them so much more, and you get to understand the needs, and probably also the other aspects that you wouldn't even understand before, that was stopping you from working on health and well-being. I hope that was concise.
That was amazing, but a nice introduction also about your work in India. It was really nice to hear about it. Emmanuel, please.
Sure. Good morning, first of all, to colleagues in Peru, and good day to everyone else from wherever you might be joining us today. I think my experiences are quite similar to what Petra has mentioned. I would say it's really, really rewarding working in this field, especially working closely with communities, with people, and seeing the benefits of the work directly on their lifestyle, and having family members as well, especially when you follow up after a certain period to see how things have improved. Also, another thing that is very rewarding is working in well-being and generally health, or One Health. You kind of forced to work with people outside of your own discipline, and I think this is amazing. It's so great, and I think in the past 5 years that I've been very closely engaged in this field, I've learned so many things from so many different colleagues across different disciplines. So now I try to learn from everyone and from everything. But of course, there are challenges to that. And I would say there's two broad categories to these challenges. The first one that Petra has already mentioned is working across different cultures. So, I mean, we're both based in the UK. And when you're working with people in countries in the global south, then you're bringing a sort of westernized type of design research methodology, and you quickly find out that it doesn't work in practice, because it has to be adjusted to the local culture, to the local knowledge, to the local truths. There's also issues with ethics, of course, engaging communities over there, how you approach gatekeepers. But the other, I would say, broad category of challenges is working with people from the medical and clinical background, who have a very different approach to research. They're a very westernized type of medicine, and things are either black or white. And of course, for the majority of disciplines, but especially in healthcare, especially outside of certain countries, design is all about creating pretty graphics. So talking about the value of design and what design can do in a specific healthcare setting is a challenge. and it's a challenge in the UK as it is in, for instance, working somewhere like in Ghana. But there's ways I found from personal experience where this can be resolved. But yeah, I would leave it to that. These are the main challenges.
That's a very interesting idea. This cultural aspect on one side, connecting with people on the other side, but also consider the clinical medical background, like you said right now, Emmanuel. Because of course we are not doctors. We're not, even that we can be so much involved into design medical devices or design or improve medical system or systems around medical field. We are not the people who are in charge of improving the health, but rather I think we can be this type of discipline that can improve that ecosystem or that system in which these different actors are going to be involved. And I want to bring this idea of a keyword that came out what both of you were saying, this idea of thresholds. The idea of that, when is the moment when for example, you say, I want to improve in this particular way of for a community, but I don't want to mess with what does it mean for them in a cultural aspect, because I think it's a very, very particular and very sensitive area, especially for both of you. Now that you brought something interesting, you both located in the UK, you're coming for the idea of the global north, and or at least you are in the global north. How that experience for you was at the beginning until today. This idea of, am I doing this right? And I'm messing with the people, and they're going to listen to what I want to say, not only in terms of the community, but also in terms of the medical background, not with this westernized approach.
Can I go?
Yeah, please.
Well, I wanted to say, one thing naturally how it works is, as I think is with absolutely anything, is that you do research and then you test error, iterate. And I think, especially, I think even at this, at least in my point of view, it doesn't even matter if you are working for another culture, because even, for example, if you're in UK, let's say you're in London, working for north of London, working for south of London is a totally different thing, because it's just today I don't think there's just such thing, as working for a single context, because we're having a Glocal talk, right? So everyone is connected, and in one place you can have so many different cultures, and more we have literally issues of people's feeling that they're lacking of home, because we have third country kids, are more and more a chance. So I think it's just making a more user-focused approach and really getting to fully understand who is that you are designing for, what are their requirements, how do they want to feel when they're interacting with your product is the key. But I think also when Emmanuel was talking, it just at one point came to my head, and I think this is at least in my point of view, is a quite of a problem when it comes to design, is that we think that we have to create a solution to the problem. We're so often designing as, oh, I'm a designer, I'm going to work with et cetera, a number of people, and we're going to create the solution. Where what you were just saying, Cesar, it's also about how can we facilitate something. So how can we provide a tool to people to maybe even in health to create their own patient journey, so to create a tool that can aid them in their process. And I think this is also an outcome of a design that is rarely as used, or rarely as this focus of how can we bring something that is in the process that is going to maybe help the user to make their own decision, rather than we have this brief and how can we solve that. And especially in today, when everything is merging and when each issue is becoming more complex, it's really about rethinking, okay, what am I doing as a designer? can I even create a solution? Because, you know, can I even do that? You know, so I don't know, that's sort of my view.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would say there's a lot of it is a mindset. You know, the mindset you use when you go in these projects, and for me again is a mindset that we definitely don't have all the answers to the solutions. I mean, look for instance the state of health and well-being in the UK. It's one of the worst in Europe. The worst in Europe. I'm pretty sure we score very high in the world. It's more about learning from each other. And it's also building capacity, because I think that's the important thing. It's about showcasing and exploring, you know, the value of design within this context. It may be that there isn't, but you know, until you explore, you don't know. And also when working with communities, working closely with champions, some people that they would take forward. So when the project finishes, you know, there's still a legacy, the legacy there. But I think we need to be very careful in terms of bringing concepts and mindsets from especially Western medicine, because on and on there is examples, and actually I'm going to use an example from Peru. When I was there 3 years ago, I think it was told by a Peruvian colleague, and they were talking about the iron deficiency that, you know, is a big issue, especially in specific rural communities in Peru. And he was saying how the Western models, Western food has penetrated the society. And in the old days, for instance, I think blood was used for, I think it was chickens, as part of the ancestral diet. And of course, when the Western model of nutrition came in, these were abandoned. And of course, that kind of exacerbated the issue of iron deficiency. And they were telling me that back then there were some companies that now they're actually developing products where you could get food that actually contained these type of ancestral customs. So, and generally, I think there is a lot of wisdom in those cultural traditions, and there is a reason why they're there. You know, they've been tested for hundreds of years. So I would say always go with an open mindset.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I was going to talk about the mindset and about the outcome. I think these three keywords about, we think normally about creating a solution. Maybe it's not about the solution. We think about what is going to be the outcome in a very hard approach, right? Like, yeah, we have to develop, we have to do the system, this new service, or we have to improve this new product, right? And maybe it's not about this. Maybe it's not about that. Maybe it's more about this keyword of building capacity. Well, this phrase, building capacity. And do you guys think that this is a process that designers or everyone who relates to design or use design methods or theory is developing this mindset? You have to develop this mindset, or do you think we already have that mindset to start approaching? What do you guys think about it? I want to explore a little bit about the mindset. I think it's a very interesting idea.
I don't know. I think I want to give Emmanuel to go first for this.
Okay, no worries. I think generally as a design communities, you know, in design, I strongly believe we have the ability to engage with real people and communities, understand the everyday problems, and implement the right solution. You know, and right, I would say in brackets, what is right for the community, not just the latest or newest technology. And design often, I find it enables it to act as a bridge between different disciplines. So bringing the table disciplines that wouldn't normally talk together, which is very important in One Health approach. So I think we've got examples where design, because it sits between arts and engineering, arts and technology, has that capacity. But I think when it comes to creating that multicultural mindset, I mean, for me, what has done it was actually go and you know, spend some time in the context and the countries that I was planning to work, and you know, live in there a bit and understand what's happening, open my horizons.
Yeah. Well, if I don't know, if I'm fully honest, I never really have like I don't think I have any sort of mindset or something before I go to design. For me, it was always about just, it felt the more, as Emmanuel said, you know, about going to the places. I think for me, it was more about always getting into the issue and, you know, literally surrounding myself with information and data until something comes up to the surface. So I felt, you know, you need to just be as comfortable as you can be in the context, and really to be able to, you know, so that it almost starts to feel for you as you can, you know, walk within it, and then you can then go and do the work. For me, that often involves months and months of research, much longer. I think it's probably like 3 months. You know, I think the ratio is like 3 against 1. The 1 is the designing actually, and then the 3 is like really doing the research, getting to know everyone and all of the different perspectives. And I think, especially when it comes to something as sensitive as health and well-being, I don't think there is ever enough of time to familiarize yourself with the context.
Yeah, I think it's a very I'm trying to wrap up these two ideas, and the phrase that I can came up is learning by doing, but also learning by experience. So it's not just about just doing per se, just doing and iterate just that, but it's about making the connection. Then going back to the first part of this talk, like you said, Petra, is making this connection with people. And do you think in that line that this characteristic, in comparison to the previous talk, we were go beyond the product and we were start thinking about a system. But do you guys think, and please correct me if I'm proposing this in a very wrong way, for the particular field, or at least the area of health and well-being, we have to go the other way, like from very general to very specific. Also by using the example or the scenario of the UK, like you said, it's different design from London than from the north or in the other area. So do you think there's a very particular characteristic of when we have to think about designing for health or designing for well-being that go from general to the specific aspects? I mean, of course, that sounds very overall for every field, but I think for this particular field is a very important to have that approach and understanding of the community. What do you guys think about it?
Well, for this, I actually have the answer prepared for your second question, but because I was literally writing that about the system. But yeah, to answer this, I think it goes both ways, right? So I think that one of the greatest problems, at least from what I got to understand, is when working in design field and trying to collaborate with others, is that people don't really understand your role. They don't understand, you know, what you're going to do, how you're going to, what exactly it is that you do, and putting it into a context. Naturally, there should be also a system that is, you know, a bit wider, but then there should be also focus on, okay, let's create something that is general, but let's also try to see where we can address the individuals, where is that aspect that is still lacking, where are the crucial points. So naturally, if we speak about really about well-being in general, let's say if you take about UK, right, there's so many issues, especially when it comes to great obesity and diabetes and mental health. but also providing those services that are maybe that are more specific, such as let's say cultural or ethnic groups who have a bit different types of mental health issues. There should be there, and they should be those services should be available and out in the open rather than having this extra search that people are going for. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's more the contribution of design in that is being less specific and being more inclusive, taking that One Health approach. What you mentioned, Cesar, right at your introduction, that it's not just about the health, it's the wider well-being, is about the social, the cultural factors, and perhaps I may make sense if I give you an example on a project I've been involved. So, for instance, is a project that is looking on how to reduce the use of antibiotics, which is an issue that we're all facing because we're overusing it. And now we're at the point where the bacteria have grown resistant to it. So basically, the drugs don't work anymore. So the medical approach would be to develop more powerful medicines that will be more resistant to these bacteria, but in a few years' time, you'll be exactly in the same situation, if not worse. And again, working with colleagues from medicine, their approach in finding the research would be very, very specific. It would be about running certain biological samples to find out what bacteria are available. But I think what design has brought in the project is taking a step back and saying, hold on a minute, there's another way. What if we prevent infections in the home in the first place? Therefore, there isn't a need for people taking that much antibiotics. And working then with clinicians, what you can do is you can look at the communities in a more wider background. You can look at the houses they live in. You can look at communities from different socioeconomic backgrounds. You can look at the role of religion in, the cleanliness and hygiene, and then you can start developing intervention, but also using clinical science to understand, across the different communities what are the different types of infectious disease available. So I think is bringing that wider aspect, that One Health approach, which is the value that design research can bring.
Yeah, I think this is a very I'm trying to connect now these two ideas: ethics from one side, in terms of religious aspect, communal aspect, housing aspect, social and cultural aspects, and that leads me to the other keyword, like ethnics. Like how you, especially for both of you again, the experience of introducing this ethnographic research approach, or at least aspects of the ethnographic research approach, into the well-being focus, knowing that maybe it's not necessarily going to address the healthcare or well-being areas, but it's going to address the religion, it's going to be education, culture, even ideas like the patriarchy aspects, or like how the families are organized, or hierarchies in terms of social and communal aspects. I don't, if you want to talk about that experience for you, that would be great.
Well, I think it's also, as Emmanuel spoke about, it's understanding all of the different influencers on behavior and on practices. And I think it's just it's when it comes to the design research, I think it almost kind of comes as, an equation, like what are the influencers on the behavior, and what is the outcome practice, and how does that reflect to the well-being? And then if we're talking about behavior change that is aimed to influence better or enhancing the well-being, then never can you, as a designer or researcher, you can't go and trying to, persuade the person against the practices, but it's more about trying to find how can you communicate with them that is not just ethical, but that's, you know, that is, I'm missing the word, that is considerate, that does not disvalue anything in any point, and trying to find that you have to be creative. Like, I remember literally sometimes, as I was talking about, you know, making participants your friends, sometimes when I was doing the research with girls in India, I would literally dress up as a princess, and I would, you know, twirl around trying to make them feel comfortable enough, you know, to talk to me and to tell me about their behaviors. But any sort of these sensitive topics, they require a certain filter. They require somewhere where is your entry point, and where you can influence this new behavior, or to try to make them think, trying to, you know, bring a new perspective, bring a new lens, and a new view on the same topic that can then positively influence. You know, if for example, if we're talking about cleanliness and something that has to do with religion, you can create, you know, think about how can we bring a new behavior that doesn't contradict the existing beliefs, but that can, you know, maybe literally create some new ritual. Maybe it can be, you know, a family situation. Maybe it can be something that they can create themselves, that does not contradict, or, you know, that does not inhibit what is already there.
Yeah, I fully agree. Creativity and also bringing that holistic approach, in fact, enable you to develop more targeted interventions. And again, going back to the example I've mentioned, working with an environmental microbiologist specialized in epidemiology, he said, usually what we normally do when we do other research projects, we simply randomly will test houses, we'll find out, you know, there's certain bacteria, and then we'll make some general recommendations. But now we can understand why different households have different bacteria, what is the background, and we can have more targeted approach. And as Petra already mentioned, then the idea is you bring back the communities, and rather than dictate to them, you know, this is what you should do, you work with them. So in fact, in that project, we ended up translating the microbiological data and bringing back the communities, and with them, actually, they developed the cleaning interventions and created, I think, what we called cleaning contracts, where for a month they would clean, you know, the houses in a certain way. And again, creativity is a great tool in the arsenal of the design researcher.
Yeah, I actually was going to get back to that idea, creativity, but also when the creativity stops because other aspects, like especially these political or legal regulations that we have to obey in the end, right? And I'm going to take one of the comments that are being right now reading in the chat, like Cecilia Landa Avila. She says, thinking, designing in system is critical, especially in healthcare. This doesn't imply designing for the general or non-being specific, but acknowledging different territories that are interconnected. And I think that that's the relative for many countries. There's not only one aspect of the country that is the general overview. But for example, here in Peru, personally, I like to think of the idea that there's many Perus, honestly, different Lima than Cusco than the Amazonic regions and the mountain area, like the desert. And that's different. All of these have their own particular factors that actually get involved. And I was going to ask you, what do you think then is a role of designing for well-being? And it's going to be an obvious question, an obvious answer, maybe. What do you guys, based on your experience, think that design for well-being, or at least for healthcare, has to be implemented in a way for policies, in terms of policies and in this more systemic approach? Because, like again, in the previous talk, we were talking about the systemic idea, and we have to involve the government. Here, we are not thinking about the government itself, but also the communities that some kind is psycho-whoever. So what do you guys think about the approach that we should start thinking about?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's the so here I have like 2 points when it comes to that actually. So one is why not? So it's about one thing is also, as I mentioned earlier, is the aspect of how can we more connect design with the system, because here of course you go about not just not just the legal parts, we also talk about where you are in the world. So you don't have much of projects, let's say, in my home country in Croatia, you don't have much, I think almost any involvement of designer coming into any sort of policies. So that is that part, is how can we actually connect that bridge, firstly, to infiltrate design into the system. And secondly, especially when it comes to health and well-being, is what do we consider as health? Because you also have so much of the issues around the world still trying to think about, first it's talking about mental health. Mental health is a great taboo. We also have, in my parts of working, on menstruation as well, is that, we still have taxes on menstrual products. So it's still not even considered fully as health. Secondly, talking about abortion, it's still a topic that is religiously connected and influencing health of women all around the world. So it's also, seeing how does the system where you are view, what do they view as health? What do they view as important? So in my PhD currently, as I'm working on personal relationships, more and more I got to see how important it is in the future, because obviously we're not going to do it now, but to actually consider personal relationships as a measure of health, because the way that you have your relationships, they influence your health, your longevity of life, your satisfaction, your disease recovery. I mean, when is it going to happen that you go into, to a doctor's room and that they ask you, oh, you're depressed, you're stressed, how is your relationship with your friends or with your partner or, with your family? Do you have, so I think it's not just about when we talk about designing for well-being, it's also how can we more concretely work on implementing design into the policies, but also how can we as designers as well create more of this focus of a holistic health, and what does it mean as health? So I think, I don't know, in my view, this is currently really more pressing to create that than something else.
Yeah, I mean the policy aspect is a huge, and I would say not only to design, to all academic and research disciplines, because as researchers and academics, we're terrible. We don't speak the policy language. We write academic papers that a small minority would read in a language that only a few can fully understand. And in few situations that I've been with policymakers, although they speak the same linguistic language, is a very different. So again, I've learned the hard way that really the language of policymakers is evidence. So we need evidence-based design. And this doesn't mean that necessarily you need quantitative research. You don't just need the statistics. It is about translating also the quantitative findings and then scaling them up. But a great tool, and I think something that, for instance, someone in medical science may lack, they will have the data saying that, if you do this, it will increase by X the factor of developing a heart disease. Is they lack the way to develop empathy and communicate with policymakers. And I found that the tool to do that is storytelling. And working very closely with communities, we collect these amazing stories about how small things make massive impact to individuals' health, lifestyle, and different aspects of society. So it's about combining those representative stories with the evidence at the back. So because stories is really how we communicate since very very early years as human beings. This is how we connect, and also a story usually has a character, has a challenge, and has a resolution, a way forward. And really policy document is about that. It's addressing a certain person, addresses the challenges, and there should be a resolution. So I think we should be training ourselves more for understanding what policymakers, who are very, very busy individuals, are expecting, and using storytelling to push that forward.
Yeah. To make the information relatable and transferable. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that brings me to a quote that one of the best professors that I have at TUDEL told me. Petra already know, Roy Bendor. He he told me once, design is the tangibilization of politics. So the way your country or the way your community designs is the way that your policymakers do politics. So I think now that you bringing, both of you are bringing, you're bringing this idea. It's like, okay, then it's not about just making the politics or policy makers design, but it's more how we can understand these two areas that actually have a lot of in common to each other. How we can make this type of dialogue between policymakers, designers, politics, and on a societal level.
Yeah, I think it's that, but it's also how can, as you said, Emmanuel, like we write these research papers that probably like only a few of us read, only a few of us can understand. Like I so often get a comment that I'm not writing academic enough. And for me, it comes to a point of why do I have to? What is the outcome goal? And I think in the end, it's also, as you mentioned before, collaborating with different disciplines, but also to learn to be patient and to learn to find a tool, as you mentioned, about storytelling, but also how can we make our information as visible and understandable to not just our discipline. I think this is, communication between the disciplines should really be a subject at the university. It really should, and yeah.
That's a very interesting idea. And actually, this is something that brings us to our second big question. That I was preparing everything to reach to this part. So, based on your experience, how complex, now that we're talking about politics, we're talking about communities, we're talking about ethnographics, legal aspects, healthcare fields, and the disciplines are related to health, how complex becomes the idea of designing for health or well-being? Especially, even we were talking about connect, but we are living in a current country with that connection has been heavily severed. But beyond the pandemic, it was already become more and more complex. So how the involvement of different aspects of society, like cultural, economical, patriarchal, religious, based on your experience again, and you already somehow answered the second question, shapes or make it more difficult to put it in a way, your own design processes, or with your teams, or with your goals or ideas or objectives. How difficult was that, or how difficult is it becoming for you? Not because it's not difficult, I will prefer to say complex, because I think together we can reach a solution. But again, I want to hear from you, even this aspect, especially the connection aspect that we were constantly referring and go back during this talk.
Emmanuel, do you want to start?
Yeah, please, if you want.
Sure.
Yeah.
So the question was again how you work in how complex it is. Yeah, it is. I mean, health is a complex area because it involves, as we've mentioned already, different facets of society, and you need to take those into account. When you bring the design equation in that, it becomes more complex because, again, in different parts of the world, including in the UK, the role and value of design is not always that clear. So I think at the start I was usually trying to explain what is the role of design, the value, and how it can help. And I have to say, I kind of not gave up. I changed my tactic. I don't necessarily mention the word design when I engage with people from different disciplines. And quite often I show them from examples of published research or books in the subject of, the value this has been, design research has provided, but without naming it necessarily. I think the important thing is working with colleagues from different disciplines, and in most of the work I'm doing, I'm working with non-designers, because I think, it's all about preaching to the unconverted in a sense. If we want to promote design research beyond the design discipline, but also is being strategic. So it is about being involved in committees of the research councils that assess multidisciplinary research projects in the area of health, but also being involved in scoping future research, so that there is a very specific, so we identify the specific need and benefit for design research, for instance, in a project about digital health. And this is starting to happen actually in the UK. Now we have a system where the calls, they're challenge-led, rather than on specific disciplines, and you need to work with people from different areas. So I think it's happening by I would say showing and telling, being involved right at the heart of it, so you can change mindsets, but also you can influence and lobby for design.
Yeah. I don't know really what to add, but no, I think it's also about, as Emmanuel mentioned, about really not to mention that it's just about that we're designers, but to I rarely even I simplify now to say that I'm a designer, but I don't even consider fully that. When I, for example, view it from the lens of how I was taught design, especially in my bachelor's, because so I think it's in certain contexts, people still think, the design is creating a chair, creating a graphic design, poster or something. And I really, I do hope that also from the educational level, we get to start teaching more design as a tool for a problem, rather than automatically telling what you will do, and I think if we put it already at the start, even the way that people present themselves is going to be different, and the way that we will see our role is going to be different. But when coming to the question about the complexity of having that connection, I think it's also that when we go as designers to show our role, I think it's also not just about, it's sometimes I feel that I'm trying to justify myself, or that I'm trying to, prove myself. And as Emmanuel spoke about, giving the data, I think it's also crucial to show our role as in the long-term sense. So for example, if we're talking about creating a change somewhere, I think so much when it comes to policies is a lot about quick fixes, and it's always a lack of fund to have a bit more research. It's always a lack of fund to have a bit more person to do certain aspect, but it's then about really, and then this comes down to the well-being, right? It really comes down to think, what are we doing now will have an influence somehow 50 years from now. And that is why design comes in, because we do connect the dots within the different disciplines. And yeah, so that.
And if I may add into that very
Please.
briefly, I think Our current complex issues, especially in the area of health, cannot be solved anymore with preset responses, as we've seen. They require more than ever creative and future-oriented solutions that anticipate rather than simply responding to problems. And I think the global pandemic that has happened is an example of how we failed to anticipate something that several scientists and reports to different governments were saying, but also in terms of health more specifically. I think future-oriented is about focusing more on prevention rather than cure. That's why I said a blue zone lifestyle. So healthy lifestyle as part of your whole well-being. And I think specifically as design researchers, we've called tools again, such as speculative design and design fictions, as a methods where we can creatively anticipate and explore different future scenarios, which again, some of them can be then with relevant data can help develop policies that anticipate future challenges.
Yeah, and I think that also brings a very itchy question. I'm going to a easy question that I have in my head right now. Is because we are facing right now this transition, well, originally from more tangible products in terms of design, or these more graphical pieces, like as examples, a chair or a poster, or just a graphic, a piece of graphical art or design. And now we are shifting into this more digital and tangible. And do you think, guys, that if we are just continually shifting into the more intangible aspects, it can be perceived that design is also losing somehow of its origins, and that also could be in the long term against what design is, and again in pro of just being trending or trying just to use the latest technology, and that reflects or that resonates with the idea of, yeah, we're trying to use just westernized health ideas, and rather than just going back to maybe some ancestral knowledge that could be useful for the transition. And yeah, that brings to this comment that also is being said, Cecilia, that it's about the idea of not mentioning design, or when design actually becomes non-design anymore. She has done it by herself, and she knows sometimes that this is the difference between having the opportunity or not. However, she believes that we should find a way to transmit the value of design research, and how we're bringing something unique. So how this transition of not only of just saying we are designers, but saying we are this type of now, well, I don't know how. We love screen, I think.
Hopefully.
Oh, no,
there he is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, you're back.
Should we spotlight?
Yeah, you disappeared for a moment, Emmanuel. I think he's still connected. But yeah, that was a question that I have in my head right now, like how we can transition or from a tangible to intangible, but without losing this what is design in the process. That what do you think about it?
But Emmanuel froze. Okay, there. I don't know. I honestly don't see it as that we will lose that, because I mean then it comes, I mean it also connects to what Cecilia mentioned, is like how can we define design? And I think that is still that we don't, design is such a young field, and I think it's not important. I don't know, in my opinion, it's not important how you define it. I don't think it will be lost if we go from intangible, because as we mentioned literally in the previous session about going back to the traditional aspects, it always comes, and I think it's just a cycle. And in my view, it's not about how do we define or if we will lose it. I think it's just about using that opportunity, or that how to say, the benefit that design in itself holds, and just try to infiltrate it as more possible. And probably with time, the definition or the value of it will come, because yeah, we have it from what, 1980s, sort of, because before that designers were architects or they were called architects. And when you think about how much we have produced literally in the last even 10 years, what all different areas of design have emerged, and also with that more problems have emerged. So I think it's more about really connecting everything, because in my view, the process is the design. It's not about, that is it a tangible, is it not a tangible. I mean, you and I studied interaction design, Cesar, so that is all about interaction. There's nothing tangible there.
That's why I said it was itchy. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, design is young as a discipline. I think one of the strengths of design research is we've managed to assimilate, and we're great at assimilating and integrating research methods from different disciplines. I mean, a lot of the disciplines we have come from social sciences, and we've made them more creative, and also we've integrated from different disciplines. So I think design research is an evolving discipline, and it's part of its strength rather than the weakness. It's not as rigid as other disciplines where this is what you get, and good luck changing things. And in terms of mentioning design, what I failed to say is that I may not necessarily mention at the start the word design, depending on who I'm talking with and which discipline they come to. But after the experience and they see the value and say, by the way, what you've just experienced and seen, this is what we call design research. And I have a great example from one of the epidemiologists we were working in Ghana, who was exposed to the Design Council's double diamond process. We used that diagram as part of the methodology and how everything fitted in the project. And several months afterwards, I received an email from him saying, I'm doing a new bid which is about epidemiological related, and I really like the diagram with the diamonds that you use. Could you please send me more info where I can read more and use it in my proposal? So I think this is part of then success of someone who is actually converted and sold to the idea of the design. So I think there is a time and place to, of course, mention design, but it needs to be calculated depending on who is your audience.
Yeah, like a perfect medicine, right? When you're going to apply a medicine, or when you're going to apply a tool or machine to help improve the patient situation. Yeah.
If I may also add, another aspect about naming design is that if we see it as recently, it seems that all of the design disciplines actually new design disciplines, let's say, came as a reflection to what was invented. So even in that, as a discipline, it stems in innovation. And to what you mentioned, Cesar, if it will be, moving away from the design in its core, I think it's actually not. I think it's, if we even start, removing from the product into something else, I think it is in its nature, right, about reacting to what is there and reacting to the problems or the new processes that have been created.
Yeah. And I think to wrap up this talk somehow, or at least I'm going to try to wrap up again, is that like well-being that is constantly changing, this idea of what does it mean to be healthy, what does it mean, what factors are getting involved into the well-being idea of someone. I think design is also experience that. Design, I think, is also experience this transition, what is going to be to do a good design. What does it mean to do a healthy design? Not for the designer's perspective, not for the people who are making it, but for the people who are aiming to help. Either be from the medical field, either be from the manufacturing field, even be from the policy makers fields. It's more about what design can help to do a well-being society, a well-being community, and finding again these particular aspects of what does it, how design can get involved, and how design is involved in this process. Maybe not mentioning design, or just looking the perfect moment to say, by the way, we are designers and we are doing design. And like Emmanuel said, your experience was a design research process. So it's more about how we can prescribe design into society in order to improve them. So it was a very interesting talk, guys. Thank you so much. If you have any remarks, Petra, Emmanuel, about this talk.
No.
Just to say, in the spirit of the theme about Glocal, I think no matter which area you're working, but especially health, it starts. I think taking a global perspective starts from looking into context locally and doing what is socially responsible and fair. I think this is the perfect vehicle for addressing some of the biggest challenges we face in society. And the only way we can do that is by working together and being part of what we really want to build.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Emmanuel. Like Mariana said. So thank you so much for this talk, Petra, Emmanuel. Again, it was a pleasure to have you, both of you here. And in around 9 minutes, we're going to have our last local talk, which actually is a nice bridge or a nice connection with this talk. Like this one was a connection with the previous one. It's about futures. It's about futures and societies. What does it mean to design for the future? So yeah, we see each other in 9 minutes. Thank you so much for listening and to collaborating with us. Thank you again, Petra and Manuel.
Thank you for
Thanks.
having us. Thank you very much.